Here's an instance of a very early walking wheel. It's also called a wool wheel or a great wheel from medieval times. I think this is from the early 14th century, this picture. And you can see the woman turning the wheel with a stick. And she has the wool roving in her hand. And this one is similar, and the guy is messing around with her. I don't know if what she doesn't look happy. She's working. And this is a very crude picture, but the idea is essentially the same. So I'm going to be making a wheel today, more like this one. This is a picture that was probably from the late 18th century, depicting a woman with some rovings on the bench, and she's spinning wool. And the older woman is actually winding the spun wool onto a winder. And this is a 19th century picture depicting a colonial home with a great wheel, walking wheel or wool wheel. And the rovings are there on the left, you can see on the bench part of the walking wheel. And this is pretty similar to what I'm going to be making today. Although mine has a double drive shaft on it, which it could have had. It was just a way of making it spin a little more directly and giving a greater twist, I guess you could say, not more directly, but giving it a greater twist. And I'm using some balsa wood here. This is the only piece of balsa wood I'm going to be using in this project. Everything else is hardwood, because balsa wood just wouldn't hold up, but I can use it for the base. And this is a 1/4 inch thick piece of balsa wood that I'm using. And I had to be careful how I chose this, because I wanted to make sure it didn't have a bunch of defects in it when I cut it. And now I'm going to be cutting out one of the main posts that the wheel is hooked on to, and it really would only generally have one post. Now this is some hardwood veneer that I bought, and that's why it took me a while to get this film made, because I had to wait for this to come in the mail. And I'm going to split this in half and double it up. And this seemed to be the best solution for making the wheel itself. And I'll be able to glue this together and sand it. And it can be cut with scissors, which is pretty nice. But I'm just going to measure it evenly so it's exactly the same size on both sides. And give it a quick cut. And then I'll be gluing this together after I put it together. I'll use only a little bit of wood glue to begin with, and then I'll have to sand these pieces down. Now, I made it for 1/12 size dollhouse, right? It's going to be my log home. And so 1 inch equals a foot. And this is about a 4.5 inch wheel. And I own a spinning wheel very like this, and I did show a picture of it in my last film. I have it out in my shed, and I do use it. I was one of the spinners at Greenfield Village many years ago, and you saw that silhouette, which was done by a famous silhouettist of me spinning with a drop spindle. Now this is going to be the hub, basically, of the wheel and the part that attaches to the post. And I have to carve, it's an egg-shaped piece of wood, and I have to carve the end of it off to give it a flat surface. So I'm just doing that. I did the first part of the carving by just sawing it, and then now I'm just getting rid of the rest of it with an X-Acto knife, and I'll sand it until it's flat. And that will go right in the center, and the spokes will be hooked to that little piece that I'm working on right now. And I started drilling a hole all the way through the center, and I'll finish drilling that hole because it has to turn. And I'm just using some super glue here with a long nozzle on it to get right into that crack. So it's glued together pretty firmly. And it still remains somewhat flexible. And I'm just taking a drill and going right through to complete that hole that I already started. And I'm just going to put some clothespins around this to make sure it shuts properly wherever it didn't completely close. And I don't need them on every piece. So now I'm cutting out some chipboard, and I'll put that aside. I cut those 2 rings you see to the right. And I'm going to sand the wheel itself down so that it's even. When I paint it, then it will be more solid looking. And the places where I joined it need to be sanded so that they're smooth. There. And now I'm going to cut out some veneer, wooden veneer, for the spindles. And also for the back of that hub. And I'll use wood veneer over the chipboard to make it more stable and so it can be sanded more easily. And I'll just glue it on and it'll go on the end and it'll make it really flat. Then I measured the circumference of the inside of the wheel and drew it out on this chipboard and then cut the center out where the hub goes. And then I drew in where the spokes had to go, but you'll see that in a second. This way I could have a platform to glue the spokes onto the wheel. I want these dowels that I'm using for the spokes to have just a bit of a handmade look. So I'm just running my X-Acto knife over it. I'm not cutting too much off. I'm just giving it the once over just to make it look more handmade. And I cut a hole in the middle there so that I could actually glue these in and have them go right in the center of that rim. Now I had to do these one at a time because everything isn't completely exact. It has some little bit of variance in it, and that's okay. It will still spin. I actually made this to work, but in the end I had to, I'll go over that later, why I made it so it couldn't work, and there's a good reason for that. And I'm going to use super glue instead of wood glue on this because the wood glue I was worried it would drip and glue to the paper beneath it, that cardboard. So I glued them all in, and except for that one, and this gel stuff stays put, so it made it a little easier, and there it is. Now I made this look easy, but this is one of the hardest things I've ever built to make it this symmetrical. It was very difficult. But I had so much film. I had, 7 hours of film, maybe more, maybe it was more, and I wanted to get it down under 40 minutes. So that's why this is speeded up, and I don't go through all the sanding that I had to do and all of the mistakes I made with that wheel. I had to make it 3 times. So now I'm just cutting out some more spindles. And this is actually one more little piece of balsa wood. I said I only used it on that base, but this one piece I used for the back of that wheel hub. And then I'll put a piece of veneer over that too. Ended up putting veneer and chipboard and the balsa wood. And then I just glued it together. And when it dried, I glued it on the back, just like that, and drilled a hole through it. And I had these rather large straight pins that were thick, and they seemed to work really well for everything where I needed a pin on this project. And now I'm back to the platform, the base, and I'm just seeing how the wheel is going to go and where that post needs to go to hold up the wheel. And it has to be off-centered. And I have to just determine how tall that's going to be because I don't want it to be too tall or it'll look funny. And it will go beyond the 1/12 scale that I'm looking for. So I just measured that off for the post, and I'll saw that off the dowel. And this is a 1/8 dowel. I'm sorry, this is a 1/4 dowel. And I'm carving the end down because that will go into the base. And I'm just going to sand it down. And I want to give it a little bit of a handmade look as well. So I carved it on both ends and ran this rasp across it. And now I just have to make a hole there. And I have a drill that I'm doing that with. It has to be angled. So just to trim it down a little bit more. These wheels were made so that they could be knocked apart pretty easily and put back together. Because they were so big, they didn't always keep them in their rooms. They take up quite a bit of room. When I was spinning at Greenfield Village, I I use the walking wheel quite a bit, and it's mainly for wool. You could spin cotton on it. Flax is nearly impossible to spin on one of these walking wheels. But there was a little song I was taught to sing, and you would do a little song and a little two-step dance while you were spinning to make the time go by. And I did that. And the people, as an exhibitor, I did that, and the people loved it. They got a big kick out of it. And there's the hole for the pin that attaches the wheel to the post. And I just did that by hand because it had to be a rather fine hole. And then I'm just pushing that pin through. Looks like I've got to drill the hole a little bit better. The thing kept coming apart. I wasn't tightening it enough, and so I had to re-screw it in. This is just a little micro drill, and it came with the small drill heads, and there it is. And like I said, this looks a little easier than it was. That wheel was very difficult to make. I kind of do things, I make them up as I go along, so I don't have a plan here. I'm looking at an antique wheel and making it from just looking at the image. And my wheel, my walking wheel, is over 200 years old. It's over 250 years old, actually. So it's a colonial wheel. And I bought it maybe 8 years ago now. And this is the only piece of plastic. I had these hors d'oeuvre forks from the dollar store, and there's a piece on it that needed to be pretty stable. I cut 2 of them in case I dropped one or broke it. And this is going to go on the post, on the platform at the other end, and it holds the tension screw. And the tension screw will move the mother of all, which I will show you what that means. It's the thing that holds the spindles and the needle that actually the wool is spun onto. So I'm just trimming this, and there it is. I made 2 of them just because I often break things or lose them. Now these are spindles that I bought. I bought these, I don't know where I got these actually. It was either at an antique store or I bought them on Amazon, but I think these came from an antique store. I had a package of them. And I'm going to trim these pretty severely because the wheel itself is quite close to the ground. And the back spoke, there's going to just be one leg, not spoke, is angled back. And then there are 2 legs on the front that are quite a bit shorter. So you'll see that. And I had to drill a hole that's on an angle. So I'm just trying to get the angle correct and also the foot correct. So I just keep trimming that until it's where it ought to be. And then I'm just going to glue it in. And again, I'm just using super glue instead of wood glue for this. And I'll probably have to trim that foot again later. And these are the front, and they have to be splayed out away from the wheel, and they're lower than the front. And it brings the wheel closer to the person who's turning the wheel. So what you would do is you would wrap a piece of wool around the spindle, and you'd have to have quite a length of it with the roving attached to it. And a roving is hand-carded wool or machine-carded wool. In this case, it would have been hand-carded. And then you would step back away from it while you were turning the wheel, and that puts the twist into the wool. And then you would turn once you got far enough away, but you could still turn the wheel. Sometimes you have a long stick to turn it. Then you would turn the opposite direction and walk the wool back and wind it around the spindle. And then you'd start that process again. And here I'm just putting some holes in that are on an angle because these have to be splayed out in such a way they don't come straight out of the wood. It has to be splayed out, and then it has to sit properly. So I'll glue those in. And this just gives you enough time to make some adjustment, this glue. it doesn't freeze up right away. And it looks like that will work. I just pull it aside a little bit more, and then I'll have to get the other one in. And I'll have to trim these feet again a couple of times and sand them once it's together, just to make sure that it's sitting properly. And now I'm putting that back tension thing in that's made out of plastic. And I have to make it look like it has a screw going through it. And I just want to make sure I get it in to fit. Now I'm going to make the post that holds the mother of all. And I had that piece right there that you see, which is a post for whatever. It's a little too long for a stair post. But it's some kind of an architectural element that can be used in doll houses, and I had a few of those. So and they're hardwoods, so I'm going to cut it up. I can't use the two ends of it, so those will have to go, and then I'll have to carve it so that it actually fits into the wood. And one end of it will have to be somewhat flat, and that's this end that you see me using these miter scissors for, and it actually works pretty well to do this kind of carving. So I can get a flat surface on one end with it, but I'll have to trim it down quite a bit. And I'll try to cut that one piece off, but it didn't work. I ended up having to get the saw. I just couldn't cut through it. It was too hard. But it didn't take too long. And there it is. And just break it off and sand it down, and we're in business. So I'm sanding the bottom part into a point so that it can be driven into the wood where the tension, that little piece of plastic thing is for the tension screw. So there'll be a tension screw on this so that and what happens is you can adjust it, the tightness of the string that goes around that drives the wheels. And that's kind of important because string is subject to weather, and it will stretch or contract and cause the spinning action to be interrupted. So what I'm doing here is I'm just making that point a little shorter, and I'll have to flatten it out again. But this is going to actually, one end is going to hook into a round piece that holds the braces for the spindles, and you'll see that. And it doesn't need to be very long. It's going to be pretty short, actually. I just marked it. So you see the bottom where the flat piece is, and then the top that will go into a hole in this round piece that will support the mother of all. And again, the mother of all is the mechanism that holds all of the spindles and the flywheel on a Saxony wheel or a castle wheel. But this has no flywheel, and this is not one of those wheels that you could spin flax on. This is specifically for wool, but cotton could also be spun on it as well. So I'm just going to drill 2 holes. I have to have 3 holes drilled in it all together. And I was saying before, that silhouette was made, and I was working at Greenfield Village at the time in the 18th century portion, and they had a costume made for me. And I was spinning with a drop spindle, which is what you use to teach children first how to spin. But often when I've taught people to spin in the past, I start them on a drop spindle. And that was made from, it was just a wooden drop spindle. There's the 2 holes that I was talking about. And now I'm going to take a couple more of these spindles and cut them up. And this does have to be measured pretty accurately because it will, if you can't have it go off too far. So I can sand it down though if I get it off by a fraction to be equal. So that's the good thing about wood. It can be forgiving in that way, working small. I'm just going to round off the tops there. There. That's the beginning of the mother of all where the spindles will go. And there are the holes that those two pieces are going to be stuck into. And now I'm doing the hole in the middle that will be attached to the post. Now these spindles will also have tension screws, and I had to figure out a way to make them look like screws because wooden screws are not something I know how to make. So I had to use those spindles that I cut up, the portions of them that sort of look like screws, and you'll see that. And I think it does come off all right. They do kind of look like screws. But first I'll put it together on the top, and there's the top of it coming together. And I've got to get that hole drilled all the way through and make sure that it's big enough. And I end up having to carve that quite a few times to make sure that it's in there and stuck really well. And then I'll glue it. And I'll give that bottom piece another sanding. Now I have to put a tiny hole through each one of those sides that hold the pin that holds the spindle. And fortunately, those micro drills have fine enough drills on them that you can use a really large pin and it'll stick through just fine without breaking the wood. And then I can clip that pin off later. So I'm going to fit them in, and that fits. And now I have to make the actual portion that the wool goes on that spins the wool. Now remember the story of Rapunzel, and I think it was not Rapunzel. Was it Rapunzel or one of those fairy tales where she pricks her finger on the end of a spinning wheel and falls asleep? Or was that Sleeping Beauty? I don't remember. But anyway, the only kind of spinning wheel that could have been would have been a walking wheel because it does have a rather sharp point at the end. And you could conceivably hurt yourself on that end of that needle. So that's the only thing I could think of that makes sense to me. Whichever fairy tale that is, maybe somebody can tell me. Now I'm going to make the tension screw, and try to make it look like a screw. Probably have to trim that off a little bit. And I just glued it to the plastic. Put a pretty generous amount of glue on it. And I'm going to stick this post into there and make sure it fits, and it did. And now I'm drilling a hole right through the center of a dowel. And this was a little bit tricky. This is just a round 1/16 dowel that I'm trying to drill. And there's the tension screw again. And there has to be a handle on it. And now I'm going to do the spindles for the needle that the wool is actually spun on. And I'm just using chipboard for this. And I'll put a couple of pieces together. I'll glue them and then I'll sand them down. I just have to get the hole centered because it'll have to go right through the pin. And then I'm going to harden it with super glue. The liquid super glue, not the gel kind. That doesn't really work real well with this. It's great for sticking things together, for me anyway. And then the really liquid stuff helps to harden stuff. But it is very runny. But in this case, it's a good thing. Okay. I'm going to glue them together. And make sure that they're lined up, the holes. And there. And you'll see. And I drilled a hole right through that piece of dowel. And that was tricky. But I managed to do it. And this is going to go on that one end of that needle. because there's a small spindle that will be on that, carved into that, that actually turns that spindle. So it's a spindle. It will spin. It has to spin. That's the way it works. So I'm going to carve it down on one end. And then I'm going to carve a groove into it where the actual cord will go that will turn it. So I'm just using a rasp with a sharp edge on it to do that. Okay, I just want to make sure it fits. It has to be a certain length. So I want to carve a little bit more off the end. And now I'm just carving the end of that spindle, which will keep the wool from going past a certain point once it's wound. And then I will cover it with that liquid glue. Make sure the hole is still there. I had to drill it again because the glue covered the hole. So there. Now that's what the wool gets wound on the sharp edge up to that flat piece. Now I'm going to put the post in that holds the mother of all and the tension mechanism. And I have to put another little piece in the tension mechanism to make it look like the screw is actually going all the way through. So that's what that little tiny round piece was. And I'm gluing that right there on that side, and then that will get glued to the post and make it look like it's going all the way through. And I'm going to use these as tension screws as well, these pieces off that chair rail. I think it's chair rail, or not chair rail, chair spindles. So I'm going to make 2 of those. Now I'm going to make the spindles that drive the drive band, and there's going to be several of those. This is a double drive spinning wheel. A lot of them were direct drive, and they would be the drive belt would be hooked directly to the wool spindle. But this actually was a little better way to do it, because there would be one wheel would drive directly to the big wheel, and then another littler couple of different wheels that could be adjusted next to it would hook to the wool spindle. And it made it a much smoother operation. I don't know if I explained that very well, but I don't have a real technical mind, so please forgive me. And I'm just going to put a little hole in that. And this has to be made out of 3 pieces of chipboard, different sizes, because the drive band will fit right between it. And these were carved out of wood, but I have to just make them look like wood after I harden them. And I harden them with that liquid super glue. I'm just trying to get the holes centered completely. I found these scissors helped to poke a hole initially first, and then I actually ended up drilling through because it just made it a bigger hole and took a little bit of that paper out of the way. So I have to put 3 together. The small one is in the middle, and I'll have to glue those together. I have to make one more hole. I don't know if you can find a plan for something like this online. I suppose if you search hard enough, somebody has a plan. But I'm not somebody who's going to be making plans. So if you can't figure out how to make it from this video, there will be no written information other than this. I'm just not that good at that kind of thing. Okay, there they are sandwiched together. And now I'm just going to cover them with that liquid glue. I'll leave it on the pin for a few minutes. And then I'll take it off and let it dry. Just make sure it's pressed together hard enough. And get any excess glue out of there, because the drive band goes right on that little wheel. Okay. Now I need to get another little piece of wood here, and this is actually going to also be a drive band spindle that hooks on to that bigger one that I just made on a pin. And I'll have to drill a hole through that. But the way I'm going to separate the spindle, this is the adjustable spindle, is just taking some of this armature wire and making a little spring, and then I'll cut the circles off and I'll put 2 on it. And that's what I'm doing. I'm just making a kind of spring, and then I'm cutting them off so that I get at least 2. I ended up cutting more because sometimes you wreck stuff, right, when you're making things. So, and then I'm just going to glue these on with the gel glue. You have to get them spaced. I found this to be kind of difficult. I had to work really fast, and it was not easy. I just kept pushing them into the glue and going around. It was very frustrating, but I did manage to do it, and you'll see it in a second. I finally got it. I almost threw it away. I was so frustrated with it, but I did get it. Okay, there it is. All right. And that's going to be attached to a needle. It has to have a hole drilled through it. So I'm going to drill that right now, and there it is. A nice hole. And we put this larger spindle on, and then that's going to be right next to it, glued to it, so that they spin together. So that's part of the mother of all. And then when that's painted, it will look like it's one piece. And I'll clip that pin off. And these are going to be the tension screws at the bottom. And the tension screws raise and lower that mechanism of the spindles so that it can be adjusted for the drive band. Because again, with wood and natural products in those days, things would expand and contract, and you would need to be able to make adjustments accordingly. So I'm just going to glue that together now. And then I'm going to glue what looks like screws on the bottom, wooden screws. And you would have to turn these from the bottom, by the way. They wouldn't be turned from the top, obviously, because you had to keep that needle in the same spot. So there would be actually a screw into a screw. So it's kind of hard to explain, but anyway. Now this has to be attached. And there were various ways to attach this. Some were with leather, some had some kind of twine that would attach them. Mine's going to be a sort of leather attachment, but it's going to be made out of chipboard that hangs that needle on there so that it'll spin. Now that needle you see on the top is going to be clipped off. And there, it's done. That's the mother of all. You see the 2 little sides where I put a little piece of cardboard on each end and stuck the needle through and put the spindle on, the wool spindle. And I'm just using wood glue to glue that post in, and then the tension screw is going to be glued in the back, and the handle for the tension screw will be glued in the front of that, right there. And I did clip that other extra piece of wire off. You just didn't see me do it. And there, that's done. Now this spinning wheel's put together. It doesn't have a drive band on it yet, but it's essentially done as far as it being put together. And now I just have to paint it and put the drive band on. And I'm going to give it a coat of paint. And I'm just putting that doll, she's a 1/12 size doll, next to it to make sure it's the right size, and it is. Just going to give it a quick first coat of paint. And I didn't do any special things with the paint this time, other than put a little bit of wood glue in the paint to harden up the wood. And when you put it in the cracks, there's actually quite a bit of glue in it, it will hold it together. Now this wheel actually does work so far, and everything turns. But I couldn't keep it that way, And the reason why is because of the drive band. And so I'm just going to coat the whole thing. And then I put, after I did this, I let it dry, I put a coating of gel glaze over it in a darker color. And there it is. And now I'll put the gel glaze on it. I put one color in, but I ended up not using it. It didn't look right, so I got a darker color. And then later I put that back in the bottle. So I didn't do it right away. So that's why you see two colors there. I actually just ended up doing the darker color. And then I'd put it on, and then I'd wipe some of it off with some Q-tips just to give it a little variation and make it look a little more natural. And this has a little bit of a sheen to it, but not much. It's just enough to give it a little depth, the color of the wood. It's just cleaning up some glue that seeped through. And when this is dry, I'm going to sand it again. I gave it a quick sand. Here it is finished, though. It's completely done. And now I have to put the drive band on and put a little wool roving hanging from it. And I'm using quilter's top thread for this, so it's a bit thicker. And I waxed it, and I just put it around the first drive band, and then I put it around the second one. And now I'm going to put some wool on the wool spindle. And this is wool that I have that I spin. So it's a little difficult to do this because it is much thicker. And I just wanted to make it look kind of realistic. And so I'm wrapping it around the spindle, and I'm going to glue it on. There's nothing else I could do. So I glued it on, and I made it look like there's a roving hanging from it as best I could. And you can see the double drive band up there. There's two drive bands. Both were covered with beeswax. And then I glued this on. The drive band's glued on. And there it is, sitting in that little box with some of the other furniture. Well, this is a fun project. I hope you like it. I hope you'll try something like this. I was very doubtful that I was going to be able to do this. I honestly was afraid of it, but I did manage to make it. I did make some mistakes, but I was able to correct them, and here it is, and I'm pretty happy with it. And I think it turned out way better than I thought it would. It looks so much like my own spinning wheel. It's funny looking at it. And I'll give you one more shot of the mother of all. There it is, and the double drive band that's hooked to the spindle. And it did work. It actually all turned, and but now it doesn't. It's all glued. The string is all glued on. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you'll like and subscribe if this is your thing, or you like to watch things like this. And my next video, I am not going to make that chest of drawers. I decided I'm going to divert from it. I'm going to make a wooden wing chair for the sitting room in the log home. So look for that next week or so, and I will post it probably next Wednesday. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.